Rightful honor, Duke Cornelius, private quarters. Peterson? Cornelius spoke the name without anger. Instead, his voice transmitted disappointment and hurt. The head chef didn't look away even as he was bound and flanked by 2 guards, his spotless uniform replaced by cheap clothes only fit for a prisoner, while a thin black collar adorned his neck. His bushy mustache remained intact and properly kept. The blond man found himself feeling relieved that the head chef had done everything in his power to retain his honor and noble pride, which reflected in his green, vibrant eyes. "My Lord Duke," Peterson greeted solemnly and without resentment. Cornelius spared a moment to close his eyes, inhale deeply, then open his eyes, and he exhaled calmly. "I should have transferred you to another posting, yet my sentimentalities worked against me. It is my failure that you've managed to execute your plot." "I thank you deeply for holding me in such high esteem, my lord," Peterson replied sincerely. "Although, and do forgive me if my words come as empty flattery, it was your absence that opened a window to extract Gabriel. Otherwise, I wouldn't have dared under any other circumstances." Cornelius stroked his beard once before crossing his arms. "Meaningless praise was never your strong suit," he declared. "I must admit, Peterson, that I am both impressed and disappointed in equal measure. You've betrayed my trust, your oaths, and squandered everything you've worked for. That you found others willing to sacrifice themselves under my roof is worthy of acclaim and applause. Cleo and Roseltia, their betrayal isn't surprising, yet it wounds my heart all the same. And members of my own honor guard? If I were a paranoid man, I'd suspect you to be an agent lying in wait for the perfect chance to strike, Peterson," he said in a half-joking tone. Peterson smiled, a chuckle escaping his throat. "Me? An agent? We both know I don't have the stomach for it. Age, shared experiences, and unity, combined with extensive knowledge of the palace's layout, were in my favor, my lord." "So it seems." Cornelius's smile dropped slightly. "Why did you betray me, Peterson?" he asked, cutting to the chase, though his tone remained soft, friendly, and understanding. "I couldn't bear to see Lord Gabriel chained down any more, my lord," Peterson answered without hesitation. "To see your own flesh and blood trapped in a gilded cage of your design? I offer my most sincere apologies, my Lord Cornelius. I'm a loyal son of the principality above all." Cornelius nodded slowly, a futile attempt in the end. "No matter your intentions, Gabriel will be escorted back to the palace on short notice. Your plan only succeeded partially." He paused, analyzing Peterson's calm expression. "My son isn't gifted with creativity. Alone, without resources, and under a hostile environment, his chances of success are low under the best conditions." Peterson closed his eyes and sighed. When he opened them, he stared at his lord with a pitying gaze. "Gabriel isn't as helpless as you believe, my lord. In having him leave Camrim, I failed, but I managed to set him free from your clutches. He will find a way to elude you." "I know he will." Cornelius frowned slightly. "Your certainty is founded in misconceptions and blind hope, Peterson." The head chef shook his head slightly. "I know Gabriel more than you know him." "Cornelius!" The guards flanking the older man were about to hit him when a firm stop from their lord commanded them to halt. "You may not wish to hear my words, my lord, but they are true." Cornelius stared into Peterson's eyes for a long, silent minute, trying to find deception or mockery, but all he found was pity and understanding that could only be understood by another father. He found his voice again after letting out a deep hum. "Do you believe that my son will be able to reach forces loyal to my nephew on his own?" "He will find a way. How or what that path looks like, I dare not assume. But a path will be forged," Peterson answered. A tense silence befell the 2 men for what felt like hours, until the head chef cleared his throat. "I do not regret my actions, my lord. Nor is my resentment warranted. It is not my place to question your motives or demand answers. I accept the consequences, whatever they may be. I ask not for mercy. I implore no forgiveness." Cornelius stared at the man he'd known since he was but an idealistic adolescent. Memories tried to barge into the front of his mind, but discipline kept them at bay. They would not sway him, nor would nostalgia cloud his mind. "Your father will know of your transgressions," the Duke began. "Paradine shall join you soon, as well as other conspirators. Your titles, ranks, and positions shall be forfeited. Furthermore, you shall remain imprisoned indefinitely until I decide whether you deserve punishment or benevolence." Peterson's mouth fell open in surprise, and he lowered his head. My lord is merciful even after my betrayal? Do not confuse mercy with practicality, Peterson. Your treason is insignificant compared to my many other duties. It is Gabriel's involvement that brought you before me, Cornelius replied in a serious tone. Take this traitor away and ensure no harm befalls him or his conspirators. Now begone! The hammer of Draymore is strong, the guards proclaimed before the transmission ended. Alone in his quarters, Cornelius allowed himself a moment to pinch the bridge of his nose as plans, measures, countermeasures, orders, and strategies formed inside his mind at a frantic pace. Within mere seconds, hundreds of them had been reviewed, processed, discarded, or retained for further consideration. He turned to his strategic desk, and with a single thought, the map of the Principality appeared as a holographic display. Zooming closer to the territory of House Draymore and its neighbors, a deep hum vibrated within his throat as he replayed the message he'd received not too long ago during a meeting with Maurice Ishtal. His chief of security was brief and professional, even as shame and fear were evident in his heart with due reason. His son had escaped under his watch, and he made no excuses to deflect responsibility. That alone spared him from his initial rage. Cornelius's frown deepened. His praise of Peterson's plan was genuine. He had planned the escape meticulously for at least a few weeks, likely for months. It was a plan refined in simplicity. Whilst Gabriel's guard shifts were kept on a deliberate, ever-morphing timer to avoid creating a routine, the rest remained unchanged. Peterson took advantage of this by feeding as many personnel as he could a potent somnifacient with a delayed action. Then, his allies helped create a loop within the palace's systems, granting them the window they needed to carry out their extraction. As if that wasn't enough, he'd managed to create dozens of false alarms and security breaches to go off at the same time, drawing away even more guards and servants from their usual posts and duties. Finally, they would do everything in their power to create more distractions and misdirections, which ultimately allowed the head chef to disable security protocols and successfully smuggle his son beyond the palace's outer perimeter. As a final act of defiance, Peterson himself enacted one last distraction by destroying the remaining hoverbikes, remaining behind to face the consequences of his actions, all to give Gabriel the best chance possible of a successful escape. The rest of Peterson's failed plan was simple. Paradine would receive the group, move Gabriel to an undisclosed location, and then smuggle him off-world before he could issue a command to launch a search campaign across Camrim's capital city, Draystone. His chief of security, proving to be competent at his job, countered Peterson's plans as quickly as he could manage. Quick enough to thwart the completion of his plan, not enough to avoid partial success. But what of Gabriel? What of his beloved son? He knew him well. He understood how Gabriel thought and acted. Methodical and with strict adherence to protocol, rules, and norms. Both he and Veronica shared a volatile temper when pressed. But where his daughter was nearly incapable of seeing reason beyond her initial reaction, Gabriel only acted when there was no room for doubt. Alone, Gabriel wouldn't know what to do. Without a guiding hand or left to his own devices, he'd fall and shatter like so many times before. He excelled in 3 areas: bureaucracy, administration, and statesmanship. Had he joined him, he could have left not only Camrim but the entirety of his territory in the hands of his to govern and direct in his absence. Alas, he'd miscalculated just how deep his loyalty to his cousin ran. "Yet another failure of mine," he muttered, clenching his hands into fists. The rage and regret washed over him for an instant, but only an instant before his mind returned to the task at hand. What would Gabriel do next? Where would he go in the unlikely case he managed to leave Camrim undetected? He will first try to gather information on the current political climate. With his options open, he'll discard the notion of asking Sylvia for refuge, he said, discarding his sister as a possibility. Her indecisiveness will paint her as a liability, a poor choice, a potential threat. He'll realize that going to her will likely mean she'd return him to me to avoid a potential altercation. He won't risk heading into Kalen territory. It's too dangerous for a man such as he. Would he dare try to enter Aster territory? He would. He most definitely would if he's desperate enough, Cornelius hummed, stroking his beard. His options are limited. He doesn't lack the conviction to try to remain within Draymore territory and rally support around him. But he lacks the resources and support. Few are those who'd risk their positions and lives for him. His eyes narrowed slightly. Asylum. He'll seek asylum within Arnav territory and remain there. House Arnav has enough sway and power to grant him refuge as an honored guest. He would then try to contact the prince, providing any aid that he can possibly muster from a distance, assuming he isn't captured first. The blond man reasoned with unshakable certainty. "You will be found, my son," he said as the holographic map dissipated into nothingness. As he turned to the screen once more, he connected to the network and contacted his appointed seneschal. A minute later, a woman with vibrant blonde hair, striking orange eyes, and healthy pinkish skin, who appeared to be no older than 40 despite being over 100 years old, appeared on screen. She was wearing a luxurious green dress. Her lips were covered in neon green lipstick, and a stylish tilted white round hat adorned her head. Her name was Dinah Hansenik, head of House Hansenik, the most powerful minor house on Camrim, and his mother-in-law. "Dinah, it is good to see you." "Ah, Cornelius, how positively wonderful to see you again, my child," Dinah said in a warm, almost longing tone. "I presume this isn't a social call. You don't make the effort to talk to me all that often anymore." The Duke stared into the ancient, tired but wise eyes of his mother-in-law for several seconds, seeing in them the eyes of his late wife. With difficulty, he pushed his feelings aside, regaining his imposing posture. "Sadly for both of us, you are correct, Dinah. I come bearing disheartening news. My son Gabriel has fled from the palace with the aid of treasonous servants." Dinah nodded once in understanding. "Peterson?" she said, not truly asking, but rather confirming her initial suspicion. The Duke's silence was the answer she needed. "He had the courage to do such a thing?" "He did, alongside others close to him, including Cleo and Ruseltia," Cornelius revealed. Dinah's expression fell at the mention of the maids' names. Poor things. "I assume their punishment has been decided?" "They'll be imprisoned until I make my final decision on the matter," he replied as he internally cursed himself. He wanted to keep things short and to the point, but talking to his mother-in-law always resulted in at least some gossip and detraction from the original subject. She always had that effect on him, same as his wife. "I see," Dinah sighed. "My dear child, do be kind to them. I ask you not to forgive their transgressions, only that you stay your hand from wrapping too tightly around their necks." "It never crossed my mind to punish them unfairly," he confessed. "That's all I ask," Dinah said, then suddenly her expression turned steely and focused. "Shall I implement a planetary search?" Cornelius nodded. "Do so immediately. Detain all off-world departures from plane shuttles to the largest transport vessels. Enforce biometric identification across all ship personnel heading in or out. Dispatch guard and militia forces in search of my son with immediate orders to apprehend him with minimal force. It will be only a matter of time before he is found or he exposes himself." Dinah bowed her head. "It shall be done as you command, my Lord Regent. Gabriel will be captured and delivered home safely, even if I must carry him myself." She paused, then her smile returned. "Cornelius, my child, when will you search for another wife? Jasmine wouldn't want you to remain alone forever mourning her memory." Cornelius stiffened, knowing that she was right. Jasmine herself had made him promise that, if she were to die somehow, he'd remarry eventually. He only agreed to her silly, morbid request if she'd agree to do the same in case his life ended abruptly. He could vividly remember her smile, the warmth in her eyes, her smell and her touch. Everything. He smiled. "Eventually," he replied before cutting the connection. Closing his eyes and inhaling deeply, he buried his feelings yet again. Mourning was pointless. He'd done enough of that already. Right now, the Principality needed him, and there was much left to be done. Navenroot, capital world of House Tygan. It was a true tragedy that he couldn't be there personally to witness Felicity's downfall. He'd done all he could to ensure her suffering and shame were great for her transgressions against House Cayston. Had she succeeded, he would have organized a grand feast in her honor, sparing no expense, and perhaps gaining her ear and hand to marry her to one of his many available pawns. But she'd failed miserably. No, that didn't quite describe the level of failure she'd achieved. Her example would serve as a cautionary tale for generations to come. He smiled internally at that. No doubt Deborah and Otto, alongside the rest of their ilk, were already moving pieces, making deals, and doing everything they could to shift the narrative somehow, to shift the disgrace their useless daughter cast upon them. It would work to an extent. It didn't matter. The Reaper had already claimed victory. That would be remembered the most. not their desperate attempts to alter history. The princess's deeds were almost worthy of applause. Almost. She'd been cruel, cunning, vindictive in the most vicious way she could conjure, and yet she'd stayed her hand from doing far, far worse. The Reaper, Clara Astor, second princess of the Astorian Principality. Her grim title was laughable. At least to him it was. What had she done to deserve it? Publicly condemn the entire lineage of 3 great houses and several minor ones? How many lives had her direct order claimed? A paltry 3,000. Throughout his life, he'd claimed at least thrice that number. Granted, only 24 came from a great house. Then there was the Blood Rend, now that fear and reputation were warranted. Brutal and efficient. A living weapon forged within the womb and carried to a level rarely seen before in the Principality. Against her, he was powerless, for she played under different rules, a nuisance he'd wish removed. Yet they were not the reason why he was on Navon route. He hated to admit it, but the lush planet was beyond breathtaking, and his lungs felt clean from breathing its air. Hadrian Tegan, whilst absent, had tossed caution to the wind in favor of bringing extravaganza to his palace. Famous artists and performers were present. Arms dealers, entertainers, musicians, actors, celebrities, and even 3 lone wolves. The list of guests was vast and diverse. Admirals, generals, and other career military men and women powerful enough to warrant an invitation to join in the plethora of rich and influential nobility present. He wasn't afraid to admit that the grand banquet organized by Hadrian's ladywife was a resounding success. A most wonderful gathering of herds, snakes, fools, and potentially useful idiots. The drink was plentiful and of the highest quality. Exotic delicacies prepared by renowned chefs were being prepared with precision and all the flair such dishes warranted. It was a display of wealth, influence, and power like no other. Yet despite everything that went into making it a reality, to him, it was merely a scenario to play. Oh, and he would play. Pretending to listen to some useless vagabond commodore, he scanned the room for his real targets. He'd been trying to find them ever since his arrival, but they had eluded him thus far. Yet, he was a patient hunter. His prey would always show up sooner or later. His eyes lit up when he finally spotted them. Ravaging their transports is the most important strategy. "Wouldn't you agree, Lord Tamarin?" the Commodore asked, as 2 ladies and a commander waited eagerly for the man's reply. "You speak truth, Commodore, though perhaps overzealous in my opinion. Targeting their support ships should prove more effective. Without proper support, their range will be limited and their reactions predictable," Tamarin replied, earning the empty nods of approval from those waiting to hear his answer. The Commodore pretended to ponder on his answer. Before he could say anything else, Tamirin stood up from his chair. "My sincerest apologies. This exchange has been most riveting, but alas, I must tend to the interests of my house." "Ah, yes. Understandable, Lord Tamarin. We thank you for your wisdom and the pleasure of your company," the Commodore said, trying to hide his dejection. Without saying anything else, Tamarin left the table. He was still within hearing range when he heard the other leeches abandoning the Buffon now that their anchor was gone. Useless idiots were never in short supply. Useful ones? Well, now those required some effort.
"Excuse me?"
"A word, if you please, lords and ladies," Tamarin asked as he approached a group of Tigans. Their clothes and insignia told him everything he needed to know. Most of them were from branch houses, with 2 among them coming from the main house. They were low-ranking, but not so much that those with true importance ignored them. All of them were young, eager, and thirsty to prove themselves no matter what. It was almost too easy. "Lord Tamirin Caiston," the leading noblewoman bowed her head, presenting herself as politely as she could muster. The others followed her example, recognizing just who was in front of them. "Please, I'm a guest." "I'm the one who must show respect, not the other way around," he proclaimed before returning the gesture. His smile widened inside his mind. It truly was disgustingly simple. They were shocked by his show of respect. Of course, when was the last time the head of a great house lowered himself to greet those who didn't warrant it? Their eyes sparkled with ambition and hunger at the promise of an opportunity opening before them. Yet they were cautious. The rivalry and feud between their 2-storied houses was over 100 years old and still present in the minds of many. "There's no need for you to greet us in such a manner, Lord Tamarin," the other nobleman from the main house interjected. "Pardon my rudeness and intrusion, but are you searching for her ladyship?" "We will be happy to help you locate her," he offered. Tamarin offered a soothing smile as he replied, "I've already paid my respects to Lady Yanara. Will you join me in talks? I'm in dire need of the opinion of the youth, but I can't entrust my worries with just anyone. If you'd do me the favor of listening to my ramblings, I would consider it a personal favor, he offered, placing a most tempting reward before them. There was some reluctance in their movements. His reputation was well known, and most of it was spread by his own mouth and hands. Never enough to cause immediate rejection, but always within the realm of chance. Young, fearless, and brainless dullards always thought they could easily outwit a frail old man. The young Tigans were not that stupid. Yes, they were already proving themselves to be precisely what he was expecting them to be. A little push was all that was needed. As allies, it would be vastly beneficial for all of us to understand each other in the service of his Lord Regent. Wouldn't you agree? Tamarin asked, his words coated with heavy implications that few could refute. They all exchanged glances, then, one by one, they nodded. The next 2 hours passed quickly. This was his favorite part, the setup. Kind, empty words always worked wonderfully. Gestures of attention, support, and thickly veiled promises of support and reward to help them relax were given sporadically, never enough to raise suspicion, always within reasonable limits to fan the flames of ambition. They spoke of nonsense, gossip, and personal interests. Guards were lowered, and they relaxed, not noticing the strings etching themselves to their backs. Tamirin Caiston was patient. An opening would always come without fail. Fleet will rise. It will no longer be a fruitless dream. Under the command of House Tigan, the dead man's fleet will be no more, one noble exclaimed, entirely too relaxed and immersed in the conversation. Careful with what you desire, young man. I've seen too many lose themselves to such ambitions, Tamarin said as his expression saddened. My grandson thought similarly, and he paid a most regretful price. We share in your anger, Lord Tamarin. That honorless beast had no right to torment your grandson Casimir in such a terrible manner, said one of the ladies present. Anger? Tamarin asked, blinking in confusion. His young companions shared puzzled expressions, not expecting his reaction. Young lady, I'm not angry. I'm saddened and worried. He paused for a moment to sip from his glass of wine. My grandson Casimir was brutalized, this is true, but he isn't faultless. It was thanks to Felicity's actions that his tormentor was invited in. She paid the price, and so did Casimir. Was it tragic? Absolutely. Was it warranted? Equally so. But, Lord Tamirin, that man tortured him, said one of the young nobles. And yet it was my grandson who threw the first stone. When you attack someone in plain sight, don't be surprised when retaliation is invoked, Tamarin said, gaining another exchange of glances between his young tools. What worries me is that man. What was it again? Wolfhound? Ah, yes. Wyatt Staples, the Wolfhound. His exploits are many in such a short amount of time. Worst of all, he is a ruthless beast that may rival the Bloodrend herself in terms of brutality. Tamarin smiled as he leaned forward. His tools followed suit, now captivated by his words. I've learned that not only is he favored by House Astor, but that the Reaper herself has incorporated him into her inner circle, he revealed, causing a few choking gasps. What sort of monster must that man truly be to gain such a position? Enough to beat a lone wolf, one of the ladies whispered in response. What more is he hiding? Came another question. If he was able to do that to a potential future heir, that beast must be stopped, the second lady proposed. A most prudent conclusion, Tamarin praised. As he stands now, the Astor's Wolfhound is nothing more than a mongrel with sharp fangs but with no biting force. Yet the danger remains. Wyatt Staples could grow in power beyond our wildest nightmares. The Pretender Prince may even, in his arrogance and thirst for power, be preparing this man to replace a great house, gaining an unofficial fourth vassal house, or worse. He shuddered at the same time a smile spread within his mind. Anyone able to find more about him and cut the threat his lineage poses will be greatly rewarded by his Lord Regent. I'm sure of it. To strike down the monster while it is yet a mere cub. That was it. That was all that was needed. The seeds had been planted as he saw the gears inside the heads of his tools turn. He needn't do more except step back and let them arrive at the logical conclusion by themselves. Word was bound to spread, claiming for themselves the origin of the idea he'd implanted. Would they be successful? He didn't know. He didn't care. One or more useful idiots would take action with overinflated ambitions, or those desperate enough. Tamarin excused himself. His goal had been achieved. Now he needed to mingle and distance himself from his new tools. He would keep his word. He would do nothing to harm the staples.